So, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody in Zoom land.
Hello, hello.
Hi. So I'm gonna, this workshop is incredibly dear to me. A lot of the information I've been sharing with the patients over time, I've kind of put a lot of it together. A lot of this is very personal to me.
What?
You'll find out why. And comparing my experience of the other people who know more about themselves, or maybe people in their family get a better sense of things, right? So this is called "It's All in Your Head." Right? So was it Jack? You said, is that, no, somebody said it's not. Oh, does that mean that like none of it's real? It's not exactly. This is all about the head, right? And how the brain and the nervous system work. So this is just here. This is just a little bit about brain growth and development. So the first year, the brain actually doubles in size. The second year, it's 90% as big as it's going to be. So the whole nervous system is about 90% that second year. By the sixth year, we have full sensory motor integration. So what does that mean? Sensory motor integration. Anybody have an idea?
You can respond to your environment.
Exactly. So it has to do with the connection between our sensory system, all right? So that our sensory system is interpreting what's out there in the world, gives the information to our brain, and then our brain says, okay, we got to do this, this, and this, sends the information back to the body, right? Have I talked about that 20 million times a time, right? So it's a constant feedback loop with our brain and our body, right? What do subluxations do? They break that feedback loop, so we're not able to adapt and respond to what's going on around us or inside us, all right? So for instance, we eat a slice of pizza, right? The taste buds go, oh, pizza. Sends a message to the brain, hey, he's eating pizza again, right? The brain sends a message to the stomach going, hey, he's eating pizza, we gotta make the special enzymes that break down mozzarella. But he's Jewish, so he doesn't get it. He's lactose intolerant. All right, so that's what's happening, the constant, every time you take a step, thousands of messages back and forth. Touch something hot, sensory system. Touch, sends a message to the brain. Brain says, hey, pull your hand away, don't burn yourself. All right. Now, there are these things. This is, you're gonna probably learn something because this is all new to me. All right. This is where it's kind of getting a little personal. So I started this whole path into pediatric, becoming a pediatric chiropractor. About 14 years ago, 13, 14 years ago. And I was sitting in this one class on sensory integration issues. Never heard of it. And the woman's talking about how some people have trouble integrating their sensory environment overwhelms their nervous system. Do you know anybody like that in any way?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one thing, and then they started talking about there were these different senses I didn't even know we had. So we all know we could see, taste, feel,
Smell.
hear, taste, hear, what else?
Smell.
Smell, okay. But did you know that there are two other senses? One is called vestibula, which helps our body stay balanced, right? And then there's another one called proprioception that tells us where we are in space. Right? So that's why, alcohol hurts your proprioception. So close your eyes, you go like this, you miss your nose. That's why that's what state troopers. So she was talking about all these sensory integration issues and how it affects us. And I was sitting there, here I am, 50 years old. Yeah, I was 50. This was quite a few years ago. And I just started crying. So, it was so different. I always felt like, I was like that kid who always got picked. I don't want less than. I was always picked last, because I played team sports and I just get totally overwhelmed. Like it was just too much. But I was a kid who kept on trying anyway. So I just tortured myself. The smaller kids said, all right, I'm not going to do this. But I needed to be part of it. So what happened, so she made me, this happens all the time, so just starts with and she said, can I use you for these tests? I said, sure. So what she was testing was this thing called primary reflexes. This is all in the right down here. And these are reflexes that infants it's part of, they're supposed to have. But at a certain age, they're supposed to be integrated into the nervous system and they disappear. So I'm sure you probably heard about some of these things. More as a fight or flight, the ATNR, it's the coolest thing I do with the babies here all the time, where you turn their head and they go like this, they go defensive. All right. So and turn them this way and they go like that. And what that is, it develops that hand-eye coordination. Palmer's grasp, how babies grab you. Rooting is how they know how to, no one teaches them how to start sucking, right? Spinal galant helps them wiggle through the clothing.
Oh, Edie, you're doing something. What happened? I'm listening to his The dryer ate them.
Yeah, if you have a question, you can unmute and ask the question. If you're not going to ask a question, could you mute your microphone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the TLR has to do with head management. Baby, picking up that head, turning over, leads to crawling, walking, and standing. Right? It's interesting, the spinal column, when it's not processed, so all these things lead to different kinds of problems that these kids have. And you see a kid on the spectrum, they usually have all of these still. They don't go away. Cause all the stress and tension in the nervous system. So anyway, my son, Eve, is 15 now. By the time he was 3 or 4, it sounded like he genetically exactly like me. You ever see kids? I started noticing you couldn't just walk down the steps. You had to take one step at a time. If you ever see that, that's proprioception. The kid doesn't feel comfortable just walking down the steps. You don't know where you are in space. Right? These are kids that they fall purposely all the time. Because it's grounding to be on the ground. It's all really interesting stuff. But anyway, so by the time he got to kindergarten, he was actually not certified, classified with these sensory integration issues. And he was a mess. He got overwhelmed, he cried at this sort of thing. And I remember taking him to, like, they used to call it Bambini soccer, the kids had soccer, and he just like freeze and start crying. We started working really hard. Great cranial path. Actually, we adjust each other every week. And started working to do all this cranial work. And so Keith right now. anyway, so he now is a freshman at Newport High School playing varsity lacrosse. Starting varsity lacrosse and starting varsity soccer. And he's the youngest ski patrolman in the whole Northeast. You know, so it was like, oh, so to see how this kid changed and developed by working on his nervous system was like incredible. All right, so that was the person. So here, this is something I've done for a lot of people. I do it part of the report of findings when we have babies. I'm going to do this for everybody. So, excuse my artwork. Is that good?
Mhm.
So here's the brain and the spinal cord, all right? And covering the brain and the spinal cord is a tissue called the meninges. And the job of the meninges is it holds the cerebral spinal fluid. And the cerebral spinal fluid has quite a few jobs. First, it's like a packing device for the brain and spinal cord, it protects it. So the brain and spinal cord is sitting in this fluid. So then, you know, it's like Jello. Right? It keeps it moist and subtle. It brings all the nutrients to it. It cleans all the toxins out, which is really important because of the Alzheimer's and dementia. Just that all these toxins, waste is sitting against your brain and spinal cord, right? And there's also a lot of hormonal activity and neurological activity, different chemicals from it. And that has its own pulse, or also assists in cranial bone growth. It pushes out and allows the brain, you know, the skull to grow. And it pumps from a pump in between the sacrum and the opposite back of the head. Should have the spine. Actually, can you run and get me the spine? Mm-hmm. So it's constantly moving, which is really important. Right? Now, covering that is the skull. Oh, and if you can give me the skull. Oh,
Yeah, let me get this
give me
first.
that first. Give me the skull. So this is the sacrum, the occiput, and this is, of course, the pumping of the cerebral spinal fluid. And it's really important that both of these are moving to get that pumping going. Make sense? All right. So covering that is the skull and the spine. And these meningeal tissues attach in the sacrum, in the neck, and inside the skull. So what happens when we have these subluxations in the skull or in the sacrum, it pulls and torques on the meninges, affecting the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid, and it can actually put pressure on different parts of the brain as well. Make sense? So now, since it's attached most down in the sacrum and here, when we have that meningeal tension, that puts pressure on the whole spine. So these other subluxations are usually secondary to these. It's like a fishing reel up here and a hook. Make sense? All right. So when we have these subluxations and these bones in the skull, that's pulling and torquing on that meningeal tissue. And the neck, upper part of the neck, and down the sacrum, affecting that cerebral spine. So that good or not good? Not good. This is Martin Rosen is a great pediatric craniopathic teacher. I just want to read this quote. I don't like to read these off the slides, but I'm going to read this here. The structural underpinnings of this system, are the primary influence of its functions. Distortions, spinal or cranial, can affect the tension in these delicate life-sustaining structures. Life-sustaining structures of the neuromeningeal system. So basically, these little subluxations are affecting the whole system, affect that system greatly. So here, these are all the cranial bones, all right? This is the occiput, temporal bone, the parietal, the frontal, and so the sphenoid bone here actually is this. You could only really see it here. Everybody calls that the temples. But that's the sphenoid, that soft spot right behind your eyes. That's the sphenoid bone. All right. And then, but it's here, it's like the base of the skull, and the brain sits up here, and it connects to all the other cranial bones. It's kind of like a butterfly. So when I'm sticking my fingers in your mouth, usually what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the sphenoid bone, and that'll release all these other ones. Incredible. This is kind of connects to it. That's really important. Like with the babies, all the time they can't nurse the next one. It's a sphenoid bone. It's a sphenoid bone. All of a sudden, the whole cranial structure changes. Show you all of these here. See those pictures. This is called the parietal bone right here. Okay. I can't, adjusting everybody's skull, and I can't put this together. There we go. So this is really, a lot of these things are really interesting. So these are called the parietal bones. And this is called the sagittal suture. Does anybody remember me ever just kind of, so you're like this, and I'm opening this up right here. So this is really important because it affects the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland is for hormone regulation of the whole body. So just by, this is really stuck, there's tension on the pituitary gland. This helps with hormonal regulation, and most importantly with those adrenals, with cortisol regulation, which is the stress response to the fight or flight. All right. Now here, okay, so that's the parietal. This is the frontal bone. And often people come in with headaches, and we adjust this frontal bone. This here is called the temporal bone. Has anybody heard of TMJ? All right, so TMJ is the temporal mandibular joint. So this is the mandible, and that's the temporal. So when this is out, all right, it's going to affect the jaw, because TMJ, but also the middle ear. And so you get kids with ear infections. And a lot of times the kids can't latch because this is all, of course, it's affected. So that's the temporal bone. And also with tinnitus and vertigo. It's that. Right. This is the occiput. Now you guys understand how important that is in that pumping. Also, a lot of times people get those occipital headaches. So, anybody ever know these like bones? You know, I always thought it was like a big bowling ball. You know, there's all these pieces to it. You know. See, and this is the hole where the brain comes out and becomes a spinal cord, and the sphenoid and the occipital bone are like hinged here. So when they're out, it's actually pulling and stretching on the freaking spinal cord in the brain. Get how important this is? This is big stuff. All right. Now, oh, this is really important. See these holes right here? That's called the jugular foramen. And that's where the vagus nerve comes out. So you ever see me put, when I go behind your upper teeth and go here and I just kind of traction, I pull it, that's to leave room for that vagus nerve to come out. And the vagus nerve innervates all the organs, and it's the brain-gut connection that also regulates the stress response of the fight or flight. Right? So all these things are working in a way that could cause us to be stressed out, sick, and unhealthy. Is this interesting? I think it's very interesting. You know, and then you just see, you know, like when we're talking about, you know, about life, how much, like with my son, getting this in working order, how it changed his life. You know, he was like this scared, kind of whacked out little kid. He probably doesn't want me talking about it.
I was just gonna
Too
say
bad.
Thanks, Dad.
It was a mess. And now the kid's just like a superstar. So we all have that in us. That's one of the things that I've learned, is that, you know, the potential of a person is incredible if everything is working right. And then, you know, you see these people that have weird personalities, and this, it all comes from the nervous system. And sometimes when I see these people, they're, you know, it's kind of strange. And I look at their head and their head's all kind of whack. Oh, this is really cool. So all this cranial bones move in inspiration and expiration. And that's part of the pumping of the cerebrospinal fluid, right? But they should all be moving. And this is actually created by one of my teachers. You see it?
Yeah.
All right. So this is happening, each inspiration and expiration.
like it's breathing.
It is. And that's what I'm feeling for that. You know, when I'm adjusting to make sure that those bones are moving the way they should. It takes years to really be able to feel and figure it out. Isn't that cool?
Those green ones are parietals.
No, green ones. This is the temple bone. The temple bone, that's the occiput.
Oh,
This is the parietals up here, frontal. That's the sphenoids. You know, it looks just like a butterfly. And that's the hole where the brain comes. Between the occiput and sphenoid. So it could be, it goes like this. In fact, I don't know if when you're on your blocks, and I have to breathe in, breathe out, and I push down on your butt, I'm actually trying to affect that hole where the brain spinal cord comes out. Structure and function. The structure of our spine and nervous system affects how our body functions, ultimately affecting our health. Well, who knew? Right? Who knows that? So, you know, people come here usually because they're in pain, their shoulder hurts, their hip hurts, their back hurts, their stomach hurts, right? And what we're doing here is trying to help affect the body. Oh, it's 5 to 7. All right, thank you. Does anybody have a question that I hope I could answer?
No, it's very interesting.
So I hope you learned some.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Love you all. We'll see you in the office.